is it just not possible, feasible to expect these players to keep on performing?
We have to. We want the solution, give me my players back, and we will do it. But it's not possible right now, and I don't think it's going to happen for a long time.
He might have been referring to the players he's got injured now, but deep down, Pep Guardiola knows there's one guy who he wishes he'd never let leave: Argentina's World Cup winner, Julian Alvarez. And for Pep, what used to be his former go-to guy, who could change the game at any point he was called on. Halfway through the current season now, and for the reasons you're about to find out, Pep Guardiola knows deep down he should have never let El Arana leave in the first place. The biggest question then is, just how important was Alvarez to Manchester City?
Well, this is until maybe De Bruyne comes back in, then Haaland will find his mojo again. But yeah, he did very well coming off the bench. I think it was an interesting game in the fact that you expect to see Leipzig being all energy, high press, but again, for the first half, they didn't do it. It was exactly the same as the tie last year.
To be called the best player on that City team at some point is incredible. The stats don't lie, as we'll see later, as did the performances in the big games. It's crazy to look at all of this now when you realise just how much Manchester City invested in the guy, £14.1 million, and spent months chasing him. Even after they signed Erling Haaland in the summer of 2022, the club still went after Alvarez, and even the manager was very clear.
But Julian is amazing. So he's an extraordinary player, and many things help us. So we have an incredible, good, really won competition. So yeah, really good.
Pep was full of praise for Alvarez after the Argentine started stepping up, and rightly so. In less than no time, he'd started developing traits at the club that reminded the fans of a certain Argentina superstar they had, who also made his mark in the team. Yep, Alvarez become the Sergio Aguero regen. The most impressive thing about Alvarez was the positions he could take up. Listen to the earlier interview and hear Pep talk about him playing behind Erling Haaland. When he was still in the team, he could play in that number 10 position just behind Haaland, or as a support striker, and play out wide if he had to. His versatility had made him a key part of that City squad.
I would like Julian in our national team, Julian Alvarez, because he's, for me, like an all-around striker. He scores a lot of goals as well, but he can also create chances.
Even his teammate Manuel Akanji could say the same about Alvarez, and that's because he's the type of striker who not only scored goals but could create them as well. The all-round centre-forward.
And I think he played because he deserved it, and in the absence of Erling Haaland was a key point with Field. So yeah, really good in that terms.
Or you listen to Pep again here, and you get the idea by now. Alvarez has become more than just the backup striker to Erling Haaland. The rate at which he was improving his game and helping the team, well, it was forcing Pep's hand to include him more often. And when it got down to it, Alvarez's goal catalogue at Manchester City was quite impressive too, from scoring against Real Madrid here in the Champions League semi-final, to the winner against Chelsea in the league, or this free kick in the Champions League.
It's Julian Alvarez!
In his first season with City, he had 17 goals and 5 assists, and played a big part in the team winning the treble of the Champions League, Premier League and the FA Cup the next season. City couldn't quite replicate that same level of success, but on his part, Alvarez was just as impressive. 19 goals, 13 assists, 54 games. If there's anything you would have picked out by now, it's that Alvarez was getting involved with City a lot. Pep was using him in different positions across the pitch, and every time he was putting in a shift, so now we know just how good he was at the team and what he was bringing. The next question is, what really happened? This one is dicey because it all started with a competition that didn't involve City. At the 2022 World Cup, while Alvarez did make the team, Argentina's first-choice centre-forward was Lautaro Martinez. However, after a poor first game versus Saudi Arabia, Alvarez got the nod to start over Martinez, and from that moment on, he didn't look back. After scoring against Poland and Australia, this brace against Croatia took its total tally of goals in the competition to 4. He also bagged an assist in the same game as well. Now all of this, guys, is building up to something. As you can see, this move put Alvarez in a position he hadn't been in before, and that was the spotlight. From City making documentaries like this about him, to the talk of him completing football, it was clear now that Alvarez wasn't going to be the same guy when he got back. Not in terms of attitude, because he's always been that down-to-earth guy who just wants to play football. But it's his status that changed. Even though Pep Guardiola might have never publicly admitted it, he knew in that moment that Alvarez had grown. I mean, he just starred for his country in winning the World Cup. alongside his idol Lionel Messi. He was one of Argentina's most important performers in the competition. Alvarez got back, and to be fair to Pep, he did try to find a way to fit him more into the team. At the start of the 2023-24 season, Pep lost Ilkay Gundogan on a free transfer to Barcelona. Kevin De Bruyne's injury, it just meant that they needed a clever player who understood movement in pockets and one who could operate with space. And Alvarez became that guy. But try as he might, it didn't last. And this is where the problems set in.
But he's right, because by the end of the season, I think Guardiola tends to settle upon a side, or maybe 12 or 13 players who he uses in those big moments. And unfortunately for Alvarez, he wasn't a starter. And that must have been hugely disappointing for him, because he was a big part of what led to, that back end of the season.
This best explains it. On paper, Alvarez played 54 times in all competitions for City that season, in 7 different competitions. But the reality, as you've just seen now, is that in the big games, the Champions League matches against Real Madrid, for example, or title-deciding games against Arsenal, with Erling Haaland around, Alvarez knew he was always going to be second fiddle. And for a guy who'd just been the leading man to his country winning the biggest competition in international football, this wasn't going to cut it. Now we know what happened. Pep and Alvarez were in positions where they each had to make a decision.
This is what he had to say, of course, about his future at Manchester City. I feel very good. I played a lot of minutes, but we'll see after Olympic Games. First, if I can, I'll always take a few days off. Then we'll decide. Maybe it's annoying to be left out of big games. Players always want to help on the pitch, but my season was good, so I'm very happy.
Alvarez's comments. There's no reading in between the lines here because it was plain and simple. He wanted to be involved in the big games, and on the manager's part, Pep Guardiola couldn't guarantee that.
They suggest me through the club that he want to leave. I said, it's okay, if you want to leave. I was just happy. Imagine stay here when he doesn't want to stay.
When the manager begins to speak like Pep did, it's just signalling the inevitable. And in the end, Alvarez called time on his City career. A reported fee of €95 million. That's what Atletico Madrid paid for Alvarez. And with that kind of money, and what the team was offering, it seemed like a win-win. Right, so here comes the big one. Now we know he's gone, and why he left. Does City miss him? To understand this, we need to know what the philosophy of Pep in that attacking position Alvarez played is.
Guardiola only really uses an advanced number 9 when he has an elite centre-forward who guarantees goal.
You couldn't sum it up any better. Honestly, there's quite a lot to dissect in this, because it doesn't just put Alvarez into the picture, but also brings Haaland into it as well. In the games Alvarez played in for City, he offered a different approach to the team. This isn't to say Alvarez is better than Haaland, but the thing is, both being centre-forwards and all, these are 2 different types of players. With Alvarez, it was about clever movement, a guy who could connect the dots. He has the technical ability to link up play and drop into pockets, and as we've touched on again and again, his game is more than goals. He links up play to assist his teammates as well. Speaking of assists, here's a big one from Football Historia to you. You get quality videos like this, and on our part, we show you that subscribe button, and you click it. That easy. Alvarez is the all-round package. Could he fit in that false 9 role? Well, he did at City. If there's anyone who justified that position, it was him.
The gratitude from Julian. I've been 2 years here. We won everything together, and his contribution has been massive. Being part of the start 11 and not being part for sometimes in the certain moments.
Seeing Pep wish him all the best like this, it just sounds to me like there's a hint of regret in his voice, like he knows he could have done a lot more or gotten even better out of what he did with Alvarez. So far in the current 2024-25 season, it's been different outcomes for both parties. Manchester City has been in a rut in recent weeks, with just 1 win in the last 7. They lost 6 games in that spell for the first time under Pep Guardiola, filled with an injury crisis to key players, and the ones that were available not all performed.
You have a striker who rarely touches the ball like Haaland, you lose some control, but gain goals.
We're replaying this again, particularly this part, just because of how important this is. Erling Haaland has been City's top scorer this season, but there's something about this clip that explains City's situation this campaign. When you have a striker like Haaland, while he does his job of scoring goals, the team loses a certain amount of control on the pitch. He's got 18 goals in 21 competitions for City this season. That's very impressive on his part, but on the team's part, City have been off. If we continue City's goal-scoring numbers of current members in the team, it paints a pretty good picture of just how badly they miss Alvarez. In the Premier League, Haaland has 13 goals in 15 matches so far this campaign. The closest to him in joint second place are Josko Vardiol and Mateo Kovacic, who both have 3 each respectively. Josko Vardiol plays at left back or centre back. For a team that's chasing on all fronts in all competitions this season, now this is bad, really bad. It's in periods like this that Guardiola must realise just how important an asset Alvarez was to the team.
He's far too good to play second fiddle too.
He's such a versatile front player.
As Craig Burley states here, an all-rounder. But to start with, they miss his goals. Ilkay Gundogan, Jack Grealish, Phil Foden, Savinho. I'm not just calling a list of City's attacking options, I'm also calling a list of City's players without league goals this season, particularly from Phil Foden. The drop-off has been insane for all the wrong reasons. By contrast, Alvarez has settled quite nicely into his new team. He's playing well. And while Atleti are 3rd in La Liga, as at the time of recording this, they're just 3 points off league leaders Barcelona. While it might not quite be Erling Haaland numbers in La Liga for Alvarez so far, he's been more than decent with his new team. 11 goals in all competitions so far, 5 in the league, 3 in the Champions League, and 3 in the Copa del Rey. But wait, there's more. For this one, we're going to do a bit of a player comparison between Julian Alvarez and Phil Foden. The reason being that Foden is probably the closest Alvarez-type player in the City team now. Julian Alvarez has 2 assists to Foden's 1. He has 11 goals to Foden's 0. Julian Alvarez has more dribbles with 19 to Foden's 14, and has more successful dribbles with 8 to Foden's 6. These are just stats. But on the eye test, anyone who has watched City play knows Phil Foden has been AWOL since the start of the season, at least in Premier League terms. There is no doubt that Manchester City and Pep Guardiola do miss Julian Alvarez, and it shows deep in the team too. He's that player who could do everything, cover for players like De Bruyne, Foden and Haaland. He scored goals, linked up play neatly, could press, and what City fans believed was that he would go on to do possibly become the next Sergio Aguero at the club. Now, he isn't there anymore. On his part, it's like Alvarez leaving caught Pep without a solution. He went from having the best backup striker in the world to having limited options in attack. Oscar Bob, the talent from the academy seen as promising, well, he's out with a foot injury that keeps him away until at least the end of the month. He's missed over 4 months of action. In that position, the attacking one, Man City has looked very flat. Jack Grealish has struggled with injury problems, and while new signing Savinho looks good, it doesn't seem like he has the end product to match. No goals in 17 for the team so far. And we cannot go without mentioning just how disappointing the PFA Player of the Season last season was. Phil Foden's form has been awful. Ilkay Gundogan hasn't been the same since his return. Kevin De Bruyne isn't really fit yet. And Bernardo Silva's form has been in and out as well. Jeremy Doku has struggled with injury too. And the list is a lot. That's what Pep is dealing with, a squad of attacking players who are either not fit or simply misfiring. On the business side, however, it was one heck of a deal for Manchester City. When they signed Alvarez in 2022, it was on a £14.1 million deal that was going to rise with potential add-ons. To sell him for £81 million just 2 years later, a gain of £65.9 million? That's proper business. And in turn, they made Alvarez the most expensive sale in the team's history. But ultimately, it's a move Pep must be regretting. At 24, despite having already virtually completed football, Alvarez still has a lot more to give. At that age, he hasn't even gotten to what could be considered the peak of his career yet. If City had managed to keep him, it would have been a perfect coup for the future. And the reason I say that is this.
If Pep Guardiola leaves Manchester City, not only will Erling Haaland be looking to go elsewhere, so will most of the other players. And when Erik ten Hag talks about there being a massive gap between the two clubs, the massive gap is because of Pep Guardiola.
With Erling Haaland, despite the success he's achieved and should continue to achieve in the near future, the possibility that he could leave the club is always in the air. And if this becomes a reality soon, just think about what this could be for Pep if he's still in charge. If Haaland does go to Real Madrid or the Barcelona team soon, then it would mean that Pep went from having 2 of the best strikers in the world right now to having none. Getting a player like Alvarez in the modern market won't come cheap, or might never come at all. The fact that City chased him for months, more than a year even, shows it was detailed scouting that eventually got him into the team. As it is, Pep Guardiola badly needs a player like Alvarez in his team. But the sad reality is he hasn't got that anymore. You've got to feel for Pep in this period. The man is dealing with a lot, from injuries to missing players like Alvarez, and a new guy who's threatening to take everything from him all in one go. Arne Slot's start to the current season has been magical, with records already being broken. players buying into his system, and table-topping everything. There are a lot of reasons why Pep Guardiola must fear Arne Slot this season, and you can find out about them in the next video.